It all started on a Tuesday, which I now understand was my first mistake. I should have taken it as an omen, the most passive day of the week. Too tired to be Monday, too early to hope. And yet that was the day I received my first HOA violation. It came in the mailbox, naturally. No knock on the door, no neighborly conversation. Just a thin, sour-smelling envelope, the color of old yogurt, and the texture of bad news. On the front, the HOA's logo was proudly embossed in silver foil. An eagle, dead-eyed, wings spread, gripping a rake and a clipboard, like it was about to audit my soul. Inside, the letter read, "Warning of violation number 1. Reason: trash receptacle left on the curb 23 minutes past regulation pickup time. Per HOA Code 7.4.3b. Trash and recycling bins must be removed from curbside within 30 minutes of pickup. You are now on record, 30 minutes. I reread it. 3-0. As if the sanitation truck had an atomic clock strapped to its muffler, and I was expected to sprint out the door in a frenzy of obedience the moment it rolled away. I laughed, out loud, standing in my driveway like a lunatic. Surely this was a mistake. Some clipboard warrior on a power trip. I pictured a wiry guy in cargo shorts with binoculars and an unhealthy obsession with suburban control. I tossed the letter in the kitchen drawer of doom, you know the one, coupons, batteries, and receipts from 2016, and moved on with my life. That was my second mistake. Thursday came with clouds and an eerie silence, a sort of judging quiet, the kind where birds don't chirp, just stare. I got a few odd looks from neighbors. Margaret across the street gave me that tight-lipped nod people reserve for both sympathy and suspicion, but I brushed it off. Surely no one actually cared about my garbage bin. This was suburbia, not Stalinist Russia. That weekend, I mowed the lawn, pruned the hedges, waved to the neighbors, and tried to forget about the letter, until Sunday night when I saw them. 2 figures standing at the corner by the lamppost, clipboard in hand, one of them snapping a photo of my driveway. I opened the door to ask what was going on. But by the time I reached the edge of the lawn, they were gone. Only the faint scent of peppermint and printer toner lingered in the air. I found the second letter Monday morning. Warning of violation number 2. Reason: lawn presents excessive uniformity and artificial vibrancy. Creates undue aesthetic pressure on adjacent properties. Recommendation: consider allowing for natural browning or environmental blending. You are now on notice. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee halfway to my mouth, rereading the words like they might rearrange themselves into sanity. My lawn was too green? Too vibrant? I had spent months perfecting that turf, installed a timed irrigation system, treated the soil, even tried an organic fertilizer I bought from a guy at the farmer's market who may or may not have also sold artisanal beard oil. Apparently, all of that effort made me a menace. I called the number listed on the bottom of the letter. It connected me with Mrs. Judith Crenshaw, chairwoman of the Oak Meadow Preserve Homeowners Association. She answered in a voice that could only be described as lavender-scented menace. "Good morning, Mr. Feldman," she said. "Calling in regard to your grass, I presume?" "Yes," I said, already regretting the decision. "I received a letter saying my lawn is too green?" "A bit aggressively green," she corrected. "We've had a few concerns from neighbors. Some feel your property's flawless uniformity sets an unachievable standard for the street. It can cause a psychological strain. It all started on a Tuesday, which I now understand was my first mistake. I should have taken it as an omen, the most passive day of the week. Too tired to be Monday, too early to hope. And yet, that was the day I received my first HOA violation. It came in the mailbox, naturally. No knock on the door, no neighborly conversation. Just a thin, sour-smelling envelope, the color of old yogurt and the texture of bad news. On the front, the HOA's logo was proudly embossed in silver foil. An eagle, dead-eyed, wings spread, gripping a rake and a clipboard like it was about to audit my soul. Inside, the letter read, "Warning of violation number 1. Reason: trash receptacle left on the curb 23 minutes past regulation pickup time. Per HOA Code 7.4.3b, trash and recycling bins must be removed from curbside within 30 minutes of pickup. You are now on record, 30 minutes." I reread it. 3-0. As if the sanitation truck had an atomic clock strapped to its muffler, and I was expected to sprint out the door in a frenzy of obedience the moment it rolled away. I laughed, out loud, standing in my driveway like a lunatic. Surely this was a mistake. Some clipboard warrior on a power trip. I pictured a wiry guy in cargo shorts with binoculars and an unhealthy obsession with suburban control. I tossed the letter in the kitchen drawer of doom, you know the one, coupons, batteries, and receipts from 2016, and moved on with my life. That was my second mistake. Thursday came with clouds and an eerie silence, a sort of judging quiet, the kind where birds don't chirp, just stare. I got a few odd looks from neighbors. Margaret across the street gave me that tight-lipped nod people reserved for both sympathy and suspicion. But I brushed it off. Surely no one actually cared about my garbage bin. This was suburbia, not Stalinist Russia. That weekend, I mowed the lawn, pruned the hedges, waved to the neighbors, and tried to forget about the letter. Until Sunday night, when I saw them. 2 figures standing at the corner by the lamppost, clipboard in hand, one of them snapping a photo of my driveway. I opened the door to ask what was going on, but by the time I reached the edge of the lawn, they were gone. Only the faint scent of peppermint and printer toner lingered in the air. I found the second letter Monday morning. Warning of violation number 2. Reason: lawn presents excessive uniformity and artificial vibrancy, creates undue aesthetic pressure on adjacent properties. Recommendation: consider allowing for natural browning or environmental blending. You are now on notice. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee halfway to my mouth, rereading the words like they might rearrange themselves into sanity. My lawn was too green, too vibrant. I'd spent months perfecting that turf, installed a timed irrigation system, treated the soil, even tried an organic fertilizer I bought from a guy at the farmer's market who may or may not have also sold artisanal beard oil. Apparently, all of that effort made me a menace. I called the number listed on the bottom of the letter. It connected me with Mrs. Judith Crenshaw, chairwoman of the Oak Meadow Preserve Homeowners Association. She answered in a voice that could only be described as lavender-scented menace. "Good morning, Mr. Feldman," she said. "Calling in regard to your grass, I presume." "Yes," I said, already regretting the decision. "I received a letter saying my lawn is too green?" "A bit aggressively green," she corrected. "We've had a few concerns from neighbors. Some feel your property's flawless uniformity sets an unachievable standard for the street. It can cause a psychological strain." I stood there in my bathrobe, coffee in hand, wondering if anyone else could see what I was seeing. Margaret peeked through her blinds. So did someone else up the block. I could see a curtain shift. No one came outside. No one ever did when the HOA was involved. This neighborhood runs on fear. And Mrs. Crenshaw's reign is the kind that installs psychological speed bumps in your brain. Later that afternoon, I caught a glimpse of one of the foot soldiers, part of the so-called Aesthetic Compliance Subcommittee, a guy named Todd. Mid-40s, khaki shorts, HOA-issued polo that looked like it had never known joy. He was crouched behind my mailbox with a clipboard, inspecting the angle of my sprinkler heads like a CSI technician. I stepped outside and said, "Can I help you?" Todd stood up like a kid caught peeing in a pool. "Routine inspection," he muttered. "You're on my property." He hesitated, then pointed at the sidewalk. I'm within easement boundaries. Pretty sure the easement doesn't include sniffing my fescue. He blinked. We've had reports. From who? The birds? He didn't answer, just scribbled something down and walked off like he'd just diagnosed me with eco-fascism. I tried calling Mrs. Crenshaw again. The phone rang 6 times before she picked up. Mr. Feldman, she said, in that voice that made me feel like I was wearing shoes inside a yoga studio. Still struggling with compliance? You've got people putting flags in my lawn, I said. My lawn, Judith? Mrs. Crenshaw, she corrected. And those flags are for documentation purposes. We've received several anonymous concerns about your landscaping's aggressive uniformity. Let me guess. They're watching? A pause. Then a rustling sound like wine through ornamental grasses. They always are. And she hung up. Friday morning, I woke up to another note. This time, handwritten, slipped under my door like a mafia threat. You are disrupting the natural disorder. A perfect lawn invites imperfect attention. The Preservation Collective? The what? The Preservation Collective? Was that even real? Was this like Fight Club but for people who rage against turf excellence? Was there a secret HOA cult I hadn't heard about? I tried Googling it. No results. No website. No Facebook group. Just a creeping sense of paranoia and the word collective, rattling around in my head like a wasp in a soda can. I told myself I was overreacting. Until Sunday, when I noticed a new feature on the HOA website, a real-time aesthetic compliance leaderboard. And guess who was dead last? Yours truly. I scrolled through it in disbelief. Every home had a score out of 100. My address, 48 100ths. Listed violations included excessive uniformity, provocative coloration, overstimulating turf luster, intimidating fertilizer application. But the final category hit different. Community Harmony Index, 0/20ths. Does not blend. Does not blend. Like I was some kind of smoothie gone rogue. I stared at my computer, fingers twitching over the keyboard. Somewhere between disbelief and homicidal gardening urges, I realized something important. This wasn't about grass. This was about control. Control disguised as guidelines. Tyranny sold as neighborhood pride. And it wasn't just me in the crosshairs. Dave, Margaret, probably half the block was living under some silent, chlorophyll-scented oppression. So I made a decision. The next morning, I dragged the sprinkler system controller into my garage, locked the door, and fired up my laptop. It was time to fight back, but not with angry emails or desperate phone calls. No, this needed planning, subtlety. A war fought in HOA language. I opened up the HOA bylaws, all 86 pages, and began to read. What I found on page 72 made my heart sing. A loophole. A glorious, untouched, legally binding gap in their precious doctrine. They wanted disorder? I'd give them chaos, but on their terms. The plan was forming. I just needed a little help. A little time, and maybe some spray paint. When you live in an HOA long enough, you learn one thing. Power doesn't come from rules. It comes from interpretation of the rules. And what I'd found on page 72 of the Oak Meadow Preserve Covenants and Restrictions was a gold mine. It was buried in the Historic Preservation Addendum, probably tacked on in the early 90s when someone wanted to save an old azalea bush from being bulldozed. But the language was broad, sloppy, the kind of thing lawyers dream about. Structures, features, or fixtures which significantly contribute to the aesthetic legacy of the community shall be granted exemption from standard code enforcement, pending historical application approval. No definitions, no criteria, just significantly contribute and aesthetic legacy. You know what that meant? I could apply to have my entire property declared historic. But I couldn't file as just Mark Feldman, HOA enemy number 1. No, that would get tossed faster than a Christmas inflatables violation. I needed a neutral entity, a third party, so I created one. Enter the Oak Meadow Heritage Trust, LLC. Technically a real business. Registered online in under 15 minutes, complete with a minimalist logo, fake board of directors, and a mission statement that sounded just pompous enough to be believable. Dedicated to preserving the authentic mid-2000s suburban charm of Oak Meadow Preserve through documentation, restoration, and lawnscape stewardship. I even gave myself a title, Vice President of Turf Integrity. I filed the paperwork. Then I submitted an application to the HOA's Historic Review Board, which, conveniently, hadn't met since 2014, which meant I was the Historic Review Board now. Or at least the only one paying attention to it. Within a week, I submitted the application to have my front lawn, sprinkler system, mailbox, and exterior paint color declared Aesthetic Heritage Assets. I attached a 42-page PDF featuring timeline of notable lawn events, including the Great Dethatching of 2022, photos of my grass in all 4 seasons, a fake citation from the Suburban Lawn Federation of Greater America, quotes from imaginary neighbors praising my bold yet comforting fescue philosophy. I even created an emotional impact statement that read, "The uniform vibrancy of this lawn fosters a sense of collective serenity and nostalgic optimism in a community increasingly burdened by inconsistency." It was pure HOA babble, my proudest work, and it worked. Because Crenshaw and her goons didn't know how to process it. They'd never had someone weaponize bureaucracy against them. They were used to threats, begging, maybe the occasional petition. Not a historical preservation application with a notarized mission charter and simulated aerial grass analytics. They stalled. They panicked. And then, suddenly, things began to vanish. It started with the doorbell. Gone again, this time with no note. Then the mailbox disappeared, ripped clean off the post like a magician's trick. I filed a police report. They gave me a pamphlet and a raised eyebrow. "Maybe squirrels," the officer muttered. Then came the curtains. Yes, my curtains. Sheer white, linen, tasteful. One day they were there, and the next morning they were not. Rods still hanging, hooks untouched. But the fabric? Vanished. The following night I saw them. 2 figures again. Same as before. One tall, one short. Walking slowly up the sidewalk at 3 a.m., not speaking, not rushing. They stood at the edge of my lawn, staring at my porch like it owed them money. One of them held a clipboard. I didn't move. I watched from my upstairs window, phone in hand, ready to record. But the moment I pressed video, the screen fuzzed, glitched, froze, like something out of a found-footage horror movie. By the time it cleared, they were gone. The next morning, my front door was missing. Not unlocked, not broken, removed. And in its place was a note, wood burned into a plank nailed to the frame. "Your presence disrupts the equilibrium." I should have been afraid, but all I felt was fire. I filed a formal grievance, not through email, not a complaint form. I printed the bylaws, highlighted every contradictory clause, annotated it like a college thesis, and submitted it with my historic trust letterhead. I CC'd the county zoning board, the state historic registry, and, just for fun, the local newspaper's Living in the Burbs column. The HOA held an emergency meeting. Not that they told me, but Dave did. He texted me late that night. "Dave, just left HOA thing. Crenshaw looked like someone stole her label maker. They're freaking out." Me. "Did she mention my door?" Dave. "Only to say he brought this upon himself." Me. "She's gonna love phase 2. Dave. "You have phases?" Me. "Buddy, I have a PowerPoint. By Monday, I had the paperwork ready to go. Phase 2. The Visual De-Escalation Protocol. According to HOA Code 9.3.7, homeowners under active violation review must reduce visual intensity of property features until full compliance is restored. Now, normally this meant taking down wind chimes or painting over bold trim, but I took it literally. I began making the house disappear. Window by window, wall by wall, I wrapped the home in shade-matched canvas, printed with high-res images of dead grass, peeling paint, and overgrown shrubs. The illusion was perfect from the street. My pristine yard now looked like a foreclosure special. Neighbors whispered. One actually called the city to report a blight issue. I intercepted it with my Heritage Trust credentials. Mrs. Crenshaw left a flyer on my porch. Please see us to discuss your recent alterations. Your property is no longer harmonious with community standards. And I replied on trust letterhead. Oak Meadow Heritage Trust hereby invokes Section 12.2c. Alterations necessary for historical simulation shall not be construed as violations. Check. And almost? Mate. The best part? Every time the HOA tried to escalate, sending letters, citing bylaws, I'd bounce them back with legalese-laced counters and obscure references to sections of the charter so old they were probably written on Windows 98. I even started mailing them violation reports of my own, citing their signs for font discrepancy with original branding and Todd's landscaping for visual hostility through shrub symmetry. Crenshaw stopped responding to emails. Then she stopped waving at anyone. And that's when Dave said the magic words. You know, a lot of people are getting sick of this crap. That's when I knew. I wasn't just a one-man resistance anymore. I had a neighborhood. And the HOA? They had no idea what was coming. Next up, Chapter 4, The Pie and the Excavator. The HOA makes its boldest move yet, but Mark's got a whole community, a projector, and a pie chart, and not the kind you eat. Shall I continue? Monday arrived, like a reckoning. The sun rose on Oak Meadow Preserve as usual. Hummingbirds zipped, sprinklers hissed, and Margaret's cat defiled my mulch bed for the third time that week. But something was different. At precisely 8:42 a.m., a rumble echoed down the cul-de-sac. Not a lawnmower, not a delivery truck, no. An excavator. It rolled in like a slow yellow god of doom, tracked treads grinding over the pavement, its massive arm poised like it was about to perform an unsolicited home lobotomy. It came to a stop in my driveway, idling ominously. There was no operator, just a handwritten sign zip-tied to the bucket that read, Scheduled demolition, 9 a.m. per HOA Resolution Number 27B. Please prepare by vacating the structure and attending the community brunch. Pie encouraged. Brunch. Pie. Like that would soften the whole, we're evicting you via construction equipment thing. I stared at it from my porch. Well, door frame. Still no actual door, clutching my coffee like a weapon. My visual de-escalation protocol drapes flapped in the breeze. The house looked like a crime scene already. I guess they figured one final boom would solve their aesthetic discomfort once and for all. The HOA wanted to make an example of me. Unfortunately for them, I was planning to do the same. I didn't go to the brunch empty-handed. Oh no. I brought a banana cream pie, as requested store-bought, passive-aggressively wrapped in plastic. But I also brought my laptop, a fold-out projector screen, a 62-slide PowerPoint presentation titled The Grass is Always Meaner, a timeline of HOA malfeasance, and a 3-inch binder labeled Exhibit A, Community Testimonies and Petitions. Dave came with me. So did Margaret, with her cat in a stroller, because of course she did. And over the past week, we'd quietly recruited a dozen other homeowners who'd had enough. People who'd been fined for the wrong shade of mulch, the wrong number of potted plants, or flying a flag that wasn't pre-approved. One guy got a violation because his wind chimes introduced non-conforming musicality. We called ourselves the Law and Order Alliance, because of course we did. The meeting was held in the Oak Meadow Clubhouse, a sterile, overly scented room with artificial ferns and inspirational signs like, "Harmony grows here." It did not. The table was stacked with casseroles and store-bought pastries. Crenshaw stood at the front like a suburban Grand Inquisitor in a pressed lilac pantsuit and a face stretched tighter than her HOA bylaws. "Thank you for attending," she said, voice syrupy and sharp. "Before we begin brunch, we will address the matter of Mr. Feldman's property." I raised my hand like an overeager sixth grader. "Yes, Mr. Feldman?" "I brought pie," I said, stepping forward. "And proof." I clicked the remote. The projector flared to life. The first slide read, "The Oak Meadow Greenwashing, an illustrated guide to HOA tyranny." Gasps. Actual gasps. Slide 2. A time-lapse of my disappearing mailbox, gnome, doorbell, and front door. Slide 3. Screenshots of the Historic Preservation Clause. Slide 4. My LLC registration, stamped and legit. Slide 5. A spreadsheet of every aesthetic violation issued in the past 2 years, sorted by house, race, income level, and lawn rating. The pattern was blinding. "Interesting," I said, clicking to slide 6. Homes on the east side of the subdivision received 73% more violations than the west, and of those, 92% were issued by one person, Todd. Todd, sitting near the snack table with a blueberry muffin halfway to his mouth, nearly choked. But wait, there's more. Slide 7. A recording. My phone, propped in a potted plant, catching Crenshaw whispering during a previous HOA meeting. "He thinks that lawn gives him power. We'll erase that house if we have to. Who's going to stop us?" The room went silent. I let it sit. I let the tension simmer like casserole at a passive-aggressive Thanksgiving. And then I spoke. "I've filed complaints with the County Housing Authority, the Zoning Board, and, pending approval, have listed my home as a historic residential display under Clause 12B, which means any unauthorized attempt to alter, destroy, or demolish said structure, including, say, with a goddamn excavator, violates multiple municipal codes." Crenshaw's face flushed magenta. "I've also filed for an injunction," I added. "So unless your brunch includes a team of municipal attorneys and a permit for demolition, I'd move that bucket off my driveway." Someone clapped. I don't know who did it first, but it spread. A slow ripple of defiance, one pair of hands at a time. Crenshaw tried to speak. Her mouth opened, closed. She looked around the room and saw no allies. Even Todd put down his muffin. The HOA board fidgeted like kids caught cheating on a group project. The treasurer whispered something to the secretary, who suddenly remembered an urgent dentist appointment. Then Margaret, bless her weaponized gentility, stood and said, "Shall we vote?" It wasn't even close. Out of the 34 homeowners in attendance, 29 voted no confidence in the current board. 2 abstained. 1 was Crenshaw. And Todd voted present, which made no sense, but no one cared. They were out, just like that. Later that day, the excavator disappeared. So did the violation letters. So did the real-time aesthetic compliance scoreboard, which I ceremonially deleted in front of a small crowd while sipping lemonade on my lawn. Mrs. Crenshaw moved out 3 weeks later. Rumor has it she relocated to a gated community in Arizona, with no grass and stricter bylaws. God help them. As for Oak Meadow, we rewrote the covenants, simplified them, stripped out the subjective nonsense. Too green is no longer a punishable offense. Trash bins within a reasonable time frame became the official policy. Wind chimes are officially unregulated. And I was elected head of the new HOA Oversight Committee. Unopposed. But I still mow my lawn every Saturday. I still edge the sidewalk. And yes, it's still the greenest damn grass on the block. Because now, it's not a provocation. It's a reminder. You'd think after everything, after the excavator showdown, the vote of no confidence, the great brunch uprising, that things would quiet down. That Oak Meadow Preserve would slide gently into a new era of lawn freedom and harmonious garbage scheduling. But that's the thing about liberation. Once people get a taste, they start asking questions. And when they realize how long they've been silently steamrolled by scented tyranny, well, they don't just want change. They want payback. It started small. 2 days after the HOA board collapsed, Dave across the street installed a neon pink flamingo in his yard. Not one of those artsy, ironic ones. No. An actual dollar store plastic flamingo with faded eyes and one leg slightly shorter than the other. It stood there defiantly in his patchy grass like a drunk ballet dancer at a silent protest. And no one said a word. No citation. No warning. So the next day, he added a second one. This one wearing sunglasses. By the end of the week, he had 6 flamingos, a miniature lawn chair, and a Bluetooth speaker that looped Jimmy Buffett from 9 to 5. And he was smiling like a man who'd finally learned how to breathe again. Across the street, Margaret swapped out her HOA-compliant beige shutters for fire truck red. "I'm 82, she said. "What are they going to do? Ban me from bunco night?" The answer? Nothing. There was no HOA board anymore, just a volunteer transition committee. And I was sitting at the top of it, mostly to make sure nobody got too inspired and tried to turn their ranch home into a medieval castle or something. But for the first time in a long time, Oak Meadow felt alive. They started calling it the Green Awakening, mostly as a joke, but it stuck. One morning, a banner appeared over the community bulletin board that read, "Vive le Réveillon." It wasn't me, I swear. Okay, it might have been Dave. People started planting what they wanted instead of what was harmoniously approved. Wildflowers. Succulents. Someone replaced their entire front lawn with clover. Another couple turned theirs into a vegetable garden with raised beds and a sign that read, "Kale Yeah." A retired couple 3 doors down repainted their garage door with a mural of koi fish. They were fined 3 separate times last year for paint tones that incite visual dissonance. Now, they hosted wine tastings in their driveway under twinkly lights and waved at everyone who passed by like royalty on a victory lap. Even the formerly silent, ghost-like homeowners, the ones who used to sneak their trash bins in like fugitives, were coming out. One Saturday, a group of us organized a trash amnesty day. We lined up our bins on the curb and left them out for 4 straight hours. Someone brought donuts. There were folding chairs. Margaret brought her cat, still strollered, still furious. And as the sun dipped behind the roof lines, no one showed up to stop us. It felt like justice, the most boring suburban justice imaginable. But justice all the same. But not everyone was thrilled. Todd disappeared for a while. Word had it he tried to run for the board of a different HOA in the next neighborhood over, but was turned down after someone anonymously mailed them his citation history and a spreadsheet titled PowerTripTodd.xls. Crenshaw? She went full ghost mode. We never saw her again except in the occasional rumor. She joined an exclusive HOA in Scottsdale that enforces sock color on Tuesdays. She's running a private Facebook group about maintaining community standards in a decaying society. She tried to file a defamation suit against Dave's flamingos. Okay, that last one might have been true. But her absence? It was palpable. The air felt lighter, the street brighter, and the sheer amount of laughter on our block? Unsettling at first, like hearing a baby giggle in a horror movie, but quickly addictive. I didn't expect to become a neighborhood figure. I was just the guy with the offensively green lawn who refused to roll over. But now, people came to me with questions. Can I use orange mulch now? What happens if I paint my shutters purple? I want to put up a bird bath shaped like a wizard. Is that too much? My answer was always the same. Does it make you happy? If yes, then do it. Because after years of uniformity and subtle fear, joy had become our best rebellion. Of course, we still had some structure. I mean, it's still a neighborhood. We established a new community charter, just 6 simple rules. Don't let your property become a health hazard. Trash goes out and comes in within a reasonable time. No excessive noise after 10 p.m., unless it's Dave's Jimmy Buffett, which we grandfathered in. Be cool. Seriously, just be cool. Flamingos are now considered sacred lawn guardians. Simple, manageable, actually voted on by real humans. One afternoon, about a month after the Green Awakening really took hold, I was out mowing the lawn. Yes, still perfect, still outrageously green, when a kid on a scooter rolled by, stopped, and stared at my yard. He squinted. Then he said, "Whoa." I grinned. "Too green for you?" He shrugged. "Nah, looks fake, but like, in a cool way." He zipped off. And for the first time since the first violation letter showed up in my mailbox, I felt something profound. Not just victory, legacy. Because maybe, just maybe, the Green Awakening wasn't just about breaking rules. It was about redefining pride. They say absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. But I think it's more specific than that. Clipboard power. That corrupts weirdly. You give someone a clipboard, a vague sense of superiority, and a list of lawn regulations, and suddenly they're a dictator in Dockers. That was Crenshaw. That was Todd. That was every sanctimonious HOA board member who ever used phrases like visual disharmony or grass-length inconsistency. But now? Now the clipboards were mine, and I'd saved one last act for the HOA's final resting place. A public event, a legal bombshell, and a glorious piece of paperwork that I'd been keeping sealed in a manila envelope marked simply, "In case of HOA resurrection." Because if life under the old HOA taught me anything, it's this: never trust a tyrant to stay buried. It happened quietly at first, just whispers. Someone mentioned a reinstatement petition floating around. A few former loyalists, probably Todd and his remaining 3 knee-length shorts, were trying to rally support for restoring order to Oak Meadow. You could smell the beige from a mile away. They framed it like concern. Lawn standards are slipping. It's starting to look like a hippie commune. Someone painted their mailbox neon green. What's next, political signs? Crenshaw, of course, hadn't been seen since her great retreat, but a new name had surfaced. Dale Withers, a newcomer, former HOA president of a community called Sunset Pines Active Adult Villas. Translation: HOA hellscape for retirees with rage issues and too much leisure time. Dale had moved into Lot 17 in March and already filed 3 noise complaints. 1 garbage aesthetic infraction, and a formal motion to reassess the viability of decentralized governance. I didn't even know what that meant, but it reeked of HOA speak, so I called a meeting, not an HOA meeting. Those were dead. This was a block assembly, open to everyone. Lawn chairs encouraged. Flip-flops welcome. Dave grilled hot dogs. Margaret brought brownies that may or may not have contained CBD. Someone projected Ferris Bueller on the side of a garage. At halftime, I took the mic. Okay, it was a karaoke setup, but it worked. "Folks," I said, "there's a group trying to bring back the HOA. A new HOA, but with the same old nonsense. Boos, loud ones. Dave shouted, "Flamingo rights!" and got a standing ovation. But here's the thing, I continued, holding up the envelope. They can't. Not legally. Because this, I ripped it open, is an HOA dissolution agreement signed by over 70% of homeowners and certified by the county clerk. Filed under Ordinance 48.7. Gasps. Cheers. One guy dropped a hot dog in celebration. And according to that ordinance, once dissolved, no new HOA can be formed here for 10 years without a unanimous community vote. I held up the final page like it was the Declaration of Independence. This is violation number 7, I said. Violation of community trust. Violation of peace. Violation of our right to live without being judged by grass color. More cheers. I scanned the crowd. Even Dale Withers was there. Arms crossed, face puckered like he'd bitten into a lemon covered in glitter. He looked ready to speak, ready to object. But before he could, Margaret's cat leapt from her lap and landed squarely on his loafers with a long, personal yowl. He sat back down. Democracy had spoken. We finished the night with sparklers, not because it was a holiday, but because it felt like one. The day Oak Meadow finally, officially, irrevocably revoked the tyranny of artificial harmony. We even took a group photo, 48 neighbors, lawn chairs, flamingos, and all. And we framed it in the clubhouse, right where the old HOA mission statement used to hang. Underneath it, a plaque. In memory of excessive control and insufficient chill. Dissolved, dethroned, and dethatched, 2025. These days, the mailbox still gets a little wild. Trash cans sometimes spend the night curbside. A couple houses are experimenting with solar panels and unconventional garden sculptures. One guy painted his garage door to look like a bookshelf. Honestly, it's kind of awesome. And my lawn? Still green, still perfect. But now, it's loud and proud green. The kind of green that says, I survived a suburban dictatorship, and all I got was this glorious turf. People still ask me how we pulled it off. How we beat the HOA. How we outmaneuvered Crenshaw. How we made banana cream pie a symbol of resistance. My answer? Paperwork. Petty patience. And a whole lot of pissed off neighbors. Because in the end, all we wanted was to live in peace, trim our hedges, and maybe, just maybe, let our lawns be as green as our little hearts desired. And that's no violation. That's victory.